He thought it was just a puppy, cold, shaking, abandoned in the snow. But from the moment his K9 refused to relax, something felt wrong. The sounds weren't right. The eyes were too aware. And when the vet finally opened the carrier, his face went pale. What he revealed forced a choice no one is ever prepared for, between compassion and the wild. Stay with us until the end, because this rescue was not what it seemed. Subscribe now and don't miss what happens next. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The blizzard came down from the mountains without warning, smothering the Montana wilderness in white silence, the kind that pressed against the ears and made every breath feel heavier than the last. Daniel Brooks stood on the porch of his cabin, shoulders hunched against the wind, the collar of his weathered winter jacket turned up to shield his neck. At 61, he was still broad through the chest, though time and injury had carved stiffness into his movements. His hair, once dark brown, was now mostly gray, cropped short in the same utilitarian style he'd worn during his SWAT years. A trimmed beard framed a face marked by sharp angles and old scars, one faint line along his jaw, another near his left eyebrow, souvenirs from doors kicked in and rooms entered too fast, too loud, too dangerous. His eyes were what people noticed most, pale blue, steady, and always watching. Even now, long retired, they scanned the tree line out of habit, measuring distance, angles, shadows. Retirement hadn't erased the instincts. It had only given them more room to echo. Beside him stood Rex. The German Shepherd was nearly 9 years old, large even by the breed standards, with a thick black and tan coat dusted with snow. His muzzle was beginning to gray, but his posture remained disciplined, alert. Rex had once been a K9 assigned to Daniel's unit, tracking suspects, clearing buildings, finding people who didn't want to be found. Age had slowed him slightly, but not enough to dull the intelligence in his amber eyes or the quiet authority in the way he held himself. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a partner who had seen blood, fear, and the worst corners of human behavior, and had never flinched. "Just a quick walk," Daniel muttered, more to himself than to Rex. The snow was already knee-deep beyond the porch. The wind cut sideways through the pines, bending them into groaning silhouettes. Daniel clipped the leash onto Rex's collar, though he doubted it was necessary. Rex never wandered. He stayed close, matching Daniel's pace without command, boots and paws crunching together as they moved away from the cabin. Daniel liked nights like this. The storm kept memories at bay. Silence drowned out the ghosts. They hadn't gone far when Rex stopped, not abruptly, no barking, no growl, but with a stillness that snapped Daniel's attention instantly into focus. Rex's ears pricked forward, his body angled toward the edge of the clearing. His tail was low, rigid. "What is it?" Daniel asked quietly. Rex didn't look at him. His gaze was fixed on the snow. Daniel followed the line of his stare and frowned. There were tracks, small ones, too small. Daniel crouched, the old ache flaring in his left knee as he brushed away loose snow with a gloved hand. The prints were shallow, uneven, and oddly shaped. Not round like a puppy's, not clean like a fox's. They looked hesitant, as if whoever made them hadn't fully committed to each step. "These aren't dog tracks," Daniel murmured. Rex shifted, letting out a low huff through his nose. Not a warning, not fear, but recognition. Something unfamiliar. The tracks led away from the cabin toward the darker line of the forest. Daniel hesitated. Years ago, following unknown tracks in bad conditions would have been a calculated risk. Now, alone and retired, it was something else entirely. Then he noticed the blood, just a smear, barely visible against the snow. Enough. Daniel exhaled slowly. Damn it. He rose and followed the trail. Rex closed at his side, body angled protectively without being told. The forest swallowed them quickly. Wind howled through the branches, shaking loose fresh sheets of snow. Visibility dropped to a few yards at best. The sound reached him before he saw anything. A noise so faint it almost vanished beneath the storm. A thin, broken sound, somewhere between a whimper and a squeak. Daniel froze. "There," he whispered. He moved carefully now, each step deliberate. The sound came again, weaker this time. Daniel pushed aside a low branch and saw it. A small, dark shape lay half-buried near a fallen log, curled in on itself, trembling violently. It couldn't have been more than a foot long. Its fur was dark, black or charcoal, plastered to its body by ice and snow. Its ears were oversized for its head, flattened tight against the cold. When Daniel approached, two wide eyes opened, reflecting the beam of his flashlight with an eerie brightness. His chest tightened. "Oh, hell," he breathed. He knelt, ignoring the protest from his knee, and extended a hand slowly. "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature didn't bark, didn't growl. It made that sound again, high, fragile, almost desperate, and tried to move, only to collapse back into the snow. Abandoned, Daniel thought immediately. Someone dumped it and drove off. Anger flared, sharp and familiar. He'd seen cruelty packaged as convenience too many times in his career. Animals, kids, people who couldn't fight back. He shrugged out of his jacket without thinking and wrapped it gently around the tiny body. The creature stiffened for a moment, then clung to the fabric with surprising strength, small claws digging in. "Yeah," Daniel murmured softly. "I've got you." Rex stood watch, head lowered, eyes fixed on the bundle in Daniel's arms. His posture wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't relaxed either. Something about the creature set him on edge. Daniel noticed but brushed it aside. Rex had always been protective. The weight, or lack of it, was shocking. The creature felt like nothing, all bone and cold. Daniel cradled it against his chest, shielding it from the wind as he turned back toward the cabin. Every step felt longer. Inside, the cabin was dim but warm. Daniel laid the bundle carefully on a towel near the fireplace. The creature stirred, blinking slowly, eyes glossy and too large for its face. "You're safe now," Daniel said quietly. He watched it for a long moment, heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt since his working days. This wasn't adrenaline. It was something older. Responsibility. Rex lay a few feet away, still watching, ears twitching at every tiny sound the creature made. Daniel didn't notice the way the creature's eyes followed him as he moved, or how its trembling slowed the moment the door closed behind them. All he knew was that, once again, he had found something broken in the snow, and he couldn't walk away. Morning arrived without color. The storm had exhausted itself sometime before dawn, leaving the mountains buried beneath a hard, blinding white. Cold light seeped through the frost-laced windows of the cabin, illuminating the quiet aftermath of the night before. Daniel Brooks woke in his chair by the fireplace, neck stiff, boots still on. For a split second, his hand twitched toward a weapon that was no longer there. The reflex faded as his eyes adjusted and memory returned. Cabin, snowstorm, Rex, and the creature. Daniel straightened slowly, joints protesting. His gaze moved instinctively to the towel near the hearth. It was empty. His chest tightened. Before he could stand, a faint sound came from the corner of the room. A thin, sharp chirr, almost metallic, followed by the soft scrape of claws against wood. Daniel turned. The small, dark creature stood near the base of the kitchen counter, steadier now, its movements quicker than they had been hours before. Its fur, no longer soaked, had fluffed slightly, revealing a dense charcoal black coat with faint silver flecks along the spine. Its body was still too lean, ribs barely hidden beneath skin, but the trembling had stopped. When it noticed Daniel watching, its head tilted sharply, eyes locking onto his with an unsettling focus. Rex was already there. The German shepherd stood between Daniel and the creature, broad shoulders squared, tail low, ears forward. He didn't bare his teeth or growl. He simply blocked the space, unmoving like a living barrier. His amber eyes flicked once toward Daniel, then back to the creature. "It's all right," Daniel murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring. The creature made another sound, not fear, not aggression, just a sharp, curious note, and took a tentative step forward. Rex shifted instantly, matching the movement, maintaining the distance with disciplined precision. Daniel watched the exchange, unease creeping into his thoughts. Rex had worked alongside dozens of dogs, encountered animals in every state imaginable. He wasn't reactive. He didn't overcorrect. If Rex was holding a line, there was a reason. "Easy," Daniel said again, firmer this time. "Nobody's taking anything from anyone." The creature didn't retreat, but it didn't advance either. It sat back on its haunches with surprising control, eyes never leaving Daniel. There was no tail wag, no submissive posture, just observation. Daniel rubbed a hand over his beard. "You're healing fast," he muttered. He set a shallow bowl of warm water on the floor, then another with softened food he'd prepared carefully. The creature approached cautiously, sniffed, then ate with quick, efficient motions. No mess, no hesitation. Rex watched every bite. Too fast, Daniel thought, too aware. Still, hunger was hunger. Cold did that to living things. By mid-morning, Daniel layered up and stepped outside, Rex at his side. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, the air brittle with cold. He shoveled a path through the snow, working methodically until movement at the edge of the clearing caught his eye. A thin plume of smoke rose from the cabin downhill. Daniel paused, leaning on the shovel. That's odd. The cabin belonged to Sarah Whitmore. Sarah was 78, slight in build, barely 5 feet tall, with a narrow frame that years of mountain living had toughened rather than weakened. Her hair, once a deep auburn, had faded to silver and was always pulled into a loose braid that hung over one shoulder. Her skin was pale and weathered, etched with fine lines that deepened when she smiled, which she didn't do often. She walked with a slight stoop, not from frailty but from grief that had settled into her bones years earlier. Daniel had met her shortly after moving to the area. They shared a quiet understanding. Two people shaped by loss who didn't ask questions they didn't want answered. He grabbed extra supplies and headed down the slope, Rex moving ahead to break trail. Sarah answered the door on the second knock. She wore a thick wool sweater and had wrapped a scarf around her neck, though the cabin was cold. Her blue eyes brightened faintly when she saw Daniel. "I was wondering if you'd make it," she said, voice steady but tired. "You should have radioed," Daniel replied, stepping inside. "Storm like that. I didn't want to bother you." He snorted softly. "You didn't." Her cabin was colder than his, the heater struggling. Daniel checked the generator, fixed a frozen line, and restocked her pantry without comment. Rex lay near the door, watchful but calm. As Daniel worked, Sarah studied him, then glanced toward Rex. "You still keeping watch like the world might kick the door in?" "Habit," Daniel said. "Hard to shut off." Sarah nodded. "My son was the same." Daniel stilled. She rarely spoke of him. "Police?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "State trooper, 10 years ago." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Daniel knew the look, the way grief sharpened into something solid, something you learn to carry without letting it crush you. "He ran toward gunfire," Sarah continued softly. "That's what they told me. Like it was something I should be proud of." Daniel swallowed. He'd run toward gunfire more times than he could count. Pride had never been part of it. Just duty. "He saved people," Daniel said. Sarah smiled faintly. "That's what I tell myself." When Daniel left, Sarah pressed his hand briefly. "Be careful out there." Rex glanced back once as they headed uphill. Back at the cabin, the creature was awake again. It circled the room silently, movements smooth, controlled. It climbed onto the low arm of the chair in a single fluid motion that made Daniel pause mid-step. "That's new," he muttered. The creature stared down at him from its perch, head angled, eyes unblinking. Rex rose, immediately placing himself between them once more. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The wind had died, but something else kept him restless. The sounds of the cabin, wood settling, the slow breath of Rex at his feet were familiar, comforting. The creature was silent, too silent. When Daniel finally drifted off, he dreamed of corridors filled with white light and doors that never stayed closed. The afternoon light lay thin and cold across the valley, a brittle sheen that made the snow sparkle like shattered glass. Daniel Brooks tightened his jacket and stepped outside, Rex pacing beside him, breath steaming in short, controlled bursts. The creature followed. It moved across the snow without stumbling, placing each paw carefully, head low, ears angled forward. It did not romp or bound the way a puppy would. It watched. Daniel noticed the way its body aligned with the terrain, how it adjusted to slope and drift instinctively, as if the mountain itself were speaking a language it already understood. "Stay close," Daniel said, though he wasn't sure the words applied. They hadn't gone far when a sound cut through the quiet, a sharp bark, followed by the frantic yelping of a hunting dog somewhere downslope. Daniel stopped. Rex froze. From between the trees emerged a lean hound, tan and white, ribs visible beneath a short coat, its ears pinned back as it ran. The dog didn't slow when it saw Daniel. It veered wide, skidded on the ice, and bolted past with its tail tucked hard against its belly. Daniel stared after it. That's not normal. Behind him, the creature stiffened. It let out a sound Daniel had never heard before, a low, guttural vibration that seemed too deep for such a small body. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. Rex stepped forward instantly, placing himself between Daniel and the creature, muscles coiled. The hound was already gone, vanishing into the trees without a backward glance. The silence that followed pressed in. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest, the slow settling of a truth he didn't want. He looked down at the creature. It met his gaze calmly, eyes dark, reflective, ancient in a way that made his skin prickle. That wasn't a puppy sound, he whispered. The decision formed quietly, without drama. They were in the truck 10 minutes later. The drive into town was slow. The road wound through snowbanks and ice-slick turns, the engine humming steadily. Daniel kept his eyes forward, jaw set. The creature sat in a makeshift carrier beside him, unnervingly still, watching the passing world with sharp focus. Rex lay in the back, alert, posture guarded. The veterinary clinic was a low building with frosted windows and a single light burning inside. Daniel parked and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. I need to know, he said aloud. Inside, the warmth hit them first, along with the smell of disinfectant and animal fur. A man stepped out from the back room at the sound of the bell. Dr. Thomas Hale was in his late 50s, tall but slightly stooped, with a narrow face and wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. His hair was thinning, gray at the temples, and his beard was trimmed close, more habit than style. Years of practice had given him a calm demeanor, but his eyes were sharp, curious, observant, the kind that missed nothing. What have we got? Hale asked, voice even. Daniel set the carrier on the table. Found it in the snow. Thought it was a puppy. Hale opened the carrier and leaned in. His expression shifted almost immediately. Not alarm, recognition. He examined the creature carefully, gloved hands moving slowly. He checked the paws, the teeth, the set of the jaw. He lifted an ear, then stepped back. The room went very quiet. This isn't a dog, Hale said at last. Daniel's breath caught. What is it? Hale removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, then looked up again. It's a gray wolf pup. Very young, male. The words landed like weight. A wolf, Daniel repeated. Yes, Hale said, and not lost by accident. He explained gently, pointing out the features Daniel had overlooked or misread, the elongated muzzle, the eye placement, the way the shoulders aligned. Dogs have been shaped by people for thousands of years, Hale said. Wolves haven't. Even as pups, their instincts are intact. Daniel glanced at the creature. It watched Hale with cool interest, unafraid. Why was it alone? Daniel asked. Hale's mouth tightened. There have been illegal traps found in the upper forest, poachers. If a snare caught one of the adults, the pup could have wandered, or been dragged and escaped. Daniel pictured the blood in the snow, the hesitation in the tracks. Can it survive? He asked. Hale hesitated. With the right care, but not as a pet. The word stung more than Daniel expected. I didn't plan on keeping it forever, he said, though he wasn't sure that was true. Hale studied him. You did the right thing bringing it here. Daniel nodded slowly. Right and easy weren't the same thing. Outside, the light was fading when they left. Rex jumped into the truck without hesitation. The wolf pup followed Daniel's movement with its eyes, then settled, curling in on itself with a quiet sigh. The drive home felt longer. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat at the table, staring at his hands, the past pressing close. He thought of doors breached and rooms cleared, of lives saved and others lost. He had believed compassion and control could coexist, that skill and discipline could override nature. Rex lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes open. You knew, Daniel murmured. Rex's tail thumped once softly. At dawn, Daniel stepped outside. The mountain was silent, the snow unbroken. Somewhere out there, a pack moved through the forest, bound by instincts older than any oath he had ever sworn. Daniel looked back at the cabin, at the small shape watching from the doorway. He understood now. Some things were never meant to be kept. The phone felt heavier than it should have in Daniel Brooks's hand. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, pale and unforgiving, illuminating the fine cracks in the wood and the faint tremor in his fingers. He had faced armed men, barricaded rooms, and decisions measured in seconds. Yet this quiet moment pressed deeper than any breach or raid ever had. Rex sat at his feet, broad back straight, ears relaxed but attentive. The German shepherd was calm in a way that felt deliberate, as if he understood that whatever came next would define more than just the day. The wolf pup lay curled on a folded blanket near the hearth, chest rising and falling steadily. Its eyes opened at the sound of Daniel's movement, dark and reflective, following him with the same unnerving intelligence he had begun to recognize as awareness rather than instinct alone. Daniel dialed the number Dr. Hale had written down for him the night before. The line connected after 2 rings. "Montana Wildlife Services," a woman answered. Her voice was firm, professional, without warmth, but not unkind. Later, Daniel would learn her name was Emily Carter, a field coordinator in her early 40s. When she arrived, he would note her practical build, average height, shoulders squared from years spent outdoors. Her hair, sandy blonde streaked with gray, was pulled into a tight ponytail beneath a weathered cap. Her face bore the marks of wind and sun, skin tanned and creased at the corners of her eyes. Not age, but exposure. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had argued with nature and learned when to stand firm and when to step aside. "This is Daniel Brooks," he said into the phone. "Former SWAT. I have a gray wolf pup at my residence, found injured after the storm." There was a pause, brief but telling. "You did the right thing calling," Emily replied. "Where exactly are you located?" Daniel gave the coordinates. As he spoke, his eyes drifted to the wolf pup. It had risen onto its forelegs, head tilted, listening. Rex shifted slightly, placing himself just enough between Daniel and the pup to remind both of his presence. "We'll send a team," Emily said. "Until then, keep the animal contained and limit contact." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I want to be present for the transfer." Another pause. "That can be arranged," she said. "But understand, this isn't about punishment. It's about the animal's survival." "I know," Daniel replied. He hoped it was true. The hours that followed stretched thin. Daniel busied himself with tasks that didn't need doing, stacking firewood already dry, clearing snow already cleared. His mind kept circling the same thought. Once he handed the pup over, there would be no undoing it. No second chances. Law and conscience rarely aligned cleanly, but when they did, the cost was often personal. Rex stayed close, never touching the wolf pup, never antagonizing it either. The two existed in careful orbit, predator and guardian, separated by something invisible but absolute. The pup watched Rex with a stillness that suggested recognition, perhaps even respect. By midday, the sound of an engine cut through the valley. A white utility truck crested the ridge, tires crunching over packed snow. Emily Carter stepped out first, followed by a younger man carrying a reinforced crate. He was tall and lean, mid-30s at most, with dark hair cropped short and a faint scar along his cheek. His name was Lucas Reed, a wildlife technician whose quiet demeanor reflected years spent observing rather than intervening. He nodded politely at Daniel, eyes already assessing the environment, the animal, the dog at Daniel's side. Emily approached with measured steps. "Mr. Brooks." "Daniel," he corrected automatically. She extended a gloved hand. "Emily Carter, thank you for calling us." Inside the cabin, the air felt tighter. Emily crouched to observe the wolf pup, her expression unreadable. She didn't reach for it. She didn't speak to it. She simply watched, letting the animal reveal itself. "Male," she said after a moment. "Young, underfed, but strong." Daniel nodded. "He survived a storm that nearly killed him." Emily glanced up. "Wolves are resilient. That doesn't mean they belong in homes." "I'm aware," Daniel said quietly. Lucas prepared the crate with practiced efficiency. The metal door gleamed, final and absolute. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. "I'd like to walk him out myself," Daniel said. Emily studied him, weighing something beyond procedure. Finally, she nodded. "All right." Daniel knelt, moving slowly, speaking softly. The wolf pup allowed him close, pressing briefly against his hand with a warmth that felt undeserved. Rex watched, unmoving, eyes steady. As Daniel carried the pup toward the crate, he felt the full weight of the choice he had made. This was not abandonment. This was acknowledgement of limits, of truth, of the line between saving and possessing. He placed the pup inside. The door closed with a muted click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Rex stepped forward then, pressing his shoulder lightly against Daniel's leg. No resistance, no protest, just presence. Emily secured the crate. "We'll take him to a rehabilitation facility north of here," she said. "Minimal human contact. If he adapts, he'll be released." "And if he doesn't?" Daniel asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "Then he'll live protected, not free, but alive." Daniel nodded once. It was enough. The truck pulled away an hour later, leaving the valley quiet once more. Snow drifted in its wake, erasing tracks almost immediately. Daniel stood on the porch long after the sound faded. Rex sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Law had been followed. Conscience had been honored. The cost, Daniel knew, would come later. Winter did not leave all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly, as if the mountains themselves were unsure they were ready to let go. Snow still clung to the high ridges, and the valley remained quiet. But the air had changed. It no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a test that had been endured. Daniel Brooks noticed the difference first in the mornings. He still woke before dawn, a habit carved into him by decades of service, but now the silence no longer pressed down on his chest. He would stand at the cabin window, mug of black coffee warming his hands, watching pale light stretch across the snowfields. At 61, his body carried its history openly. Broad shoulders slightly rounded by old injuries, hands thick and scarred, fingers stiff in the cold. His hair, clipped short and fully gray now, caught the early light, and the trimmed beard along his jaw framed a face that had softened only slightly since retirement. The sharpness was still there, but something quieter lived behind his pale blue eyes. Rex waited beside him every morning. The German Shepherd was moving slower these days, the way older working dogs did, not weak, just deliberate. His black and tan coat had grown dense for winter, and his muzzle showed more silver than it had the year before. At nearly 9, Rex was no longer eager to charge into chaos, but his posture still carried authority. When he stood, people noticed. When he walked, they made space. Years as a K-9 SWAT partner had shaped him into something more than instinct. He had learned judgment. The house felt different too. Not full, Daniel wouldn't have used that word, but no longer hollow. The absence left by the wolf pup was real, but it had not turned into regret. Daniel had learned the difference. Regret gnawed, absence simply reminded. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was clearing the last of the snow from the roof when his phone rang. He answered without checking the number. "Daniel Brooks," a familiar voice said. "This is Emily Carter." Emily stood on the other end of the line miles away, likely already dressed for the cold. Daniel could picture her easily now, sturdy boots, layered jacket, hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing. She didn't waste words. She didn't soften reality. She respected boundaries, human and natural. "How is he?" Daniel asked. There was a brief pause, just long enough to mean something. "He's adapting," Emily said. "Strong, alert, no signs of dependency." Daniel closed his eyes. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. "That's good," he said. "There's more," Emily continued. "We're expanding our winter search and rescue volunteer unit. Weather's been unpredictable and we're short on experienced ground support. Your background came up." Daniel leaned against the cabin wall, snow crunching beneath his boots. "You know I'm not law enforcement anymore." "We don't need law enforcement," Emily replied. "We need judgment, and we need dogs that know how to work in hostile conditions." Daniel glanced down at Rex, who stood nearby, ears twitching at the sound of his name spoken aloud. "You're asking about Rex," Daniel said. "Yes," Emily replied. "And you." The silence stretched. Daniel thought of doors he'd kicked in, of radios crackling with panic, of moments when hesitation meant death. Then he thought of the wolf pup disappearing into the trees, not because he had failed, but because he had chosen correctly. "What does the role look like?" Daniel asked. "Search coordination, ground navigation. Rex would act as lead tracker when conditions allow," Emily said. "No weapons, no raids, just finding people who got lost before the cold does." Daniel exhaled, slowly. "Send me the details." By the end of the week, the cabin saw visitors for the first time since the storm. The rescue team arrived in 2 trucks, engines rumbling softly in the valley. Along with Emily came Mark Jensen, a volunteer coordinator in his early 50s. Mark was tall, with a stocky build and a permanent squint from years of snow glare. His beard was thick and untrimmed, dark brown threaded with gray, and his voice carried an easy warmth. He had lost a brother to hypothermia years earlier while hiking alone, a fact that shaped the way he spoke about rescue work, careful and personal. "This isn't about heroics," Mark said as they walked the perimeter. "It's about not letting people disappear." Daniel understood that language. Rex underwent assessment quietly, patiently. He followed commands without hesitation, tracked through deep snow, and responded to hand signals as if no time had passed since his last operation. When the evaluation ended, Emily knelt to Rex's level, resting a gloved hand briefly on his chest. "He still knows who he is," she said. Daniel nodded. "So do I." That evening, Sarah Whitmore arrived just before sunset. She walked carefully up the path, bundled in her heavy coat, her silver braid tucked beneath a knitted cap. Her movements were slow but steady, each step deliberate. Her pale skin looked flushed from the cold, and her eyes, still sharp despite the years, took in the scene with quiet curiosity. "You've had company," she observed. Daniel poured her tea and set it in her hands. "I might be joining the search and rescue team." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. It was small but genuine. "My son would have liked that," she said. Daniel didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Winter passed in measured steps. Daniel trained with the team twice a week. Rex led tracks through whiteouts, his body moving with calm authority, nose low, tail steady. When they found their first lost hiker, a young man dehydrated but alive, Daniel felt something inside him settle. This wasn't adrenaline. This was purpose without violence. The news from the rehabilitation center came quietly through Emily. "The wolf pup has been relocated," she told him one evening over the phone. "Protected land, no human contact." Daniel stood on the porch, watching snow drift lazily from the pines. Good. Spring would come eventually. He knew that. But winter no longer felt endless. One morning, weeks later, Daniel and Rex moved through the trees on an active search. Snow fell thick and heavy, muffling sound. Rex paused, lifted his head, and looked back at Daniel, not for instruction, but acknowledgement. Daniel nodded once. Together, they moved forward, not to fight, not to chase, but to protect what still had a chance to be found. In the end, Daniel learned that not every miracle comes in the form of something we get to keep. Some miracles arrive quietly, wrapped in responsibility, asking us to choose what is right instead of what is easy. That night in the snow was not an accident. It was a reminder that God still works through ordinary moments, through tired hands, difficult choices, and the courage to let go. In our everyday lives, we are given the same test: to protect what we can, to release what was never meant to belong to us, and to trust that God sees the full picture even when we do not. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment about a moment when doing the right thing changed your life, and subscribe to the channel to continue walking with us through stories of faith, courage, and the quiet miracles that still happen all around us. If you believe that God still watches over those who choose compassion over control, and that doing the right thing will always find its way back to us, type Amen in the comments below. God bless you all, and thank you for watching.